Okay, so welcome to the deep dive.
Mhm.
And today we're diving into something I think we've all seen online. Those viral videos, sometimes it's like, are they studies or are
Mm.
they not? Those social experiments that, grab your attention when you're just scrolling through your feed and you
Yeah.
think, huh, is this genius or is this like jerk material?
Yeah.
And so that's what we're going to be unpacking today. Like, when do these experiments actually teach us something valuable? And when do they maybe cross a line? And we were just talking about this before we started recording. It's like, when does it go from viral to villain?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean, and the thing is, social experiments have been around forever, but with online platforms, it's a whole different ballgame. It's
Totally.
like everyone's got a camera and a potential audience now.
Right.
So that really changes how we think about observing human behavior and, even influencing it.
Right. Yeah, so let's break it down. What are we even talking about when we say social experiment? I mean, from the stuff we've been looking at, it seems like it's basically about seeing how people act, right? Like whether it's a super controlled environment or just out there in the real world.
Yeah, I think that's a good starting point. I mean, think about it like this. You see someone accidentally drop some cash on the street.
Right.
Do
Classic.
they pick it up and pocket it, or do they try to find the owner? That's like social experiment 101.
Right.
But then you get things like that bird box challenge that was all over the internet a while back. People walking around blindfolded. Now that went super viral, but was it really a social experiment in the true sense? I don't know.
That's a good point. It feels like the label gets slapped on a lot of things.
Wow.
And that's kind of where the ethical questions come in, right? Like, where's the line between harmless fun and harmful exploitation?
Exactly. And with that whole virality thing, it can get kind of murky.
For sure. And I feel like we've all seen those videos that make us cringe a little bit, like that whole Tide Pod challenge. Thankfully, that seems to have died down, but at the time, it
Bro.
was everywhere.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just about views, it was like actually dangerous.
Totally.
Okay.
I mean, you're right. A lot of this comes down to wanting to go viral, getting those clicks.
Yeah.
But the consequences can be all over the map. I mean, you've got things like the Tide Pod thing where there's actual physical risk.
Yeah.
Then there's the more, prank videos where it's mostly about embarrassing people or making them uncomfortable,
Mm.
which, I don't know, ethically, it's still a bit of a gray area for me.
It's tough because even when there's not physical harm, there can still be that emotional impact,
Right.
like feeling tricked or humiliated.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder, even with the best intentions, things can go wrong. I mean, wasn't there like a famous psychology experiment, the Stanford prison experiment,
Oh, yeah.
where they had to stop it early because it got so intense?
Exactly. It was supposed to be this controlled study about power dynamics, but it just spiraled. And that was in a university setting with supposedly all these safeguards in place. So when you think about all this stuff happening online with way less oversight, it's like, yeah, there's a lot to unpack there.
Definitely. And one of the big things that keeps coming up in the research we've done is this idea of consent.
Hmm.
It seems like a really fundamental piece of this whole puzzle. Like,
Yeah.
if you're filming people without their knowledge and then putting it out there for the world to see, is that ever okay? Even if it's meant to be funny.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest red flags to watch out for. I mean, you're not a scientist. You're a trespasser with a YouTube monetization plan.
Right.
And that changes the whole dynamic.
Okay, but what about those experiments where it seems like the message is positive? Like, setting up a situation to see how many people will help someone who's dropped their groceries or something.
Mm.
Is it still ethically iffy if the intention is good?
Even then, it gets tricky. Because, yeah, the goal might be to spread some good vibes, but those people being filmed didn't sign up for that. They didn't get to decide if they wanted their moment of kindness broadcasted to whoever.
Yeah.
Even if you get their consent afterward, it doesn't erase that initial, surprise or whatever they might have felt in the moment. Just imagine someone thinking they're witnessing a real crisis, and then boom, it's on Instagram as a feel-good story.
Yeah, you're right. Consent seems super important. So let's talk about some specific examples that have caused a stir. What about that Facebook emotional contagion study? That one always gets brought up. What can we learn from that?
Oh, yeah, that's a big one. Basically, they messed with people's news feeds to see if showing them more positive or negative posts would affect their own moods.
Wow.
And the problem was, nobody really knew that was happening to them. They agreed to Facebook's terms of service, but that doesn't mean they signed up to be a lab rat in some giant mood experiment.
So that's a clear villain in the social experiment world.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, what about something like the Free Hugs campaign? I mean, people just going around offering hugs. Where does that fall on the ethical spectrum?
That's different. Usually there's no trickery involved. It's just people being openly, friendly. Of course, you have to be aware of personal space. Not everyone wants a hug from a stranger.
Of course.
But the basic idea is pretty wholesome. It's not like those setups where you're trying to get a specific reaction out of someone for the camera.
Yeah. What about that subway piano staircase? That one was pretty cool. Turning those stairs into a giant playable piano to get people to take the stairs instead of the escalator.
Yeah.
Seems harmless enough, right?
Yeah, I'd say that one's in the viral but not villain category. It's playful. It's encouraging people to be more active. No villains here, unless you hate joy.
True that. So for anyone out there thinking of doing some kind of experiment, even if it's just for fun, what are some things they should keep in mind?
Well, first off, think about what you're actually trying to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a point to this, or is it just about getting views?
Yeah.
And think about how it might affect the people you're involving. Could it cause them any embarrassment or distress? Is there a way to do this that respects their privacy? I mean, in real research, there are these ethics boards that have to approve studies before they can happen.
Right, right. But that doesn't really exist for most of the stuff we see online, right? It's like the Wild West out there.
Pretty much. Which means content creators have to be extra careful. A good rule of thumb.
Yeah.
If you're lying to people, if you're putting them in danger, if you're trying to shame them, you're probably crossing a line.
Yeah, makes sense. We got some interesting feedback from listeners on this, too. @EthicsQueen on Twitter said, if you wouldn't do it to your grandma, don't do it to strangers.
Oh, I love that.
It's pretty simple.
Yeah, it's like instant empathy check.
Yeah. But then you get someone like @Prankster Dave who messaged us saying, lighten up, people, it's just a joke.
Yeah.
How do we square that with, all this talk about ethics?
Yeah, that's the thing about humor. It's not universal.
Right.
What one person finds funny, another person might find totally offensive.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're filming someone without their consent, it's not just about whether you think it's funny. It's about their privacy, their right to not be put on blast without knowing it.
Definitely. We also got a voicemail from Sarah in Ohio who brought up a good point. She was asking about social experiments that are meant to raise awareness for important causes, like homelessness, for example. Mm-hmm. What do you think about those ethically?
I think Sarah's onto something.
Yeah.
When it's about shedding light on a social issue and trying to build empathy, it can be really powerful. But you have to do it right. Work with organizations that know what they're doing. Treat the people involved with dignity. And get their consent whenever possible. The focus should be on helping, not exploiting.
So for content creators out there who are listening and thinking, okay, I want to try this, but I want to do it right, what are some concrete things they can do?
Well, the first thing is to really ask yourself, who benefits from this? If it's mostly about boosting your own follower count, that's a red flag. Transparency is also huge.
Okay.
Surprises are great for birthdays, not so much when you're putting someone's reaction online without their permission.
Right.
And don't be afraid to reach out to experts. Talk to social scientists or even a lawyer just to make sure you're not stepping on any toes. Oh, and this is super important. Always debrief the people who are part of your experiment and make sure they're okay with you using the footage.
Yeah. Give them the power to say yes or no.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, it seems like the big takeaway is social experiments online can be really interesting, but they come with a whole lot of ethical baggage, especially when you consider how easily things can blow up online.
Definitely. The ability to create and share this kind of content so easily means we need to be extra aware of the potential consequences. Respecting people's autonomy and not causing harm, those are non-negotiables.
And that brings us to our final thought for you today. The next time you come across one of these viral social experiments, don't just hit that like button or scroll on by. Take a second to think about what's going on behind the scenes. Is there consent? Is there potential for harm? Because we as viewers have a role to play too. What we choose to watch and share sends a message about what kind of content we want to see more of. So let's be mindful out there. Experts,